revving up to 4.5 grand. That's 60. Ho, 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 ho. In this video, I'm at the truly remarkable Jaguar Daimler Heritage Trust collection here at the British Motor Museum. Obviously, I'm not going to be doing a video about anything as fancy as this. Oh no, we're going to take a look at the world of compact Jaguars, and specifically the S-Type. So let's see what makes the S-Type the most HubNut of Jaguars. So this is a 1965 S-Type Jaguar. It's a 3.4 S, a quite controversial car. The hooded headlamps did not find favour with all, but I thought it might be interesting to look at the history of this car, and then we're going to take a very close look around this example and take it for a drive and see what makes these cars so special and why they are wrongly underrated. So the Compact Jaguar story starts with the Mk1. This one was actually owned by the father of Paul Frere, a noted racing driver, and it brought much needed volume to Jaguar. It was a big seller because it was that bit smaller than the enormous Mk7s. Jaguar was only making those in the sports cars at the time. The Mk1 was designed to slot in beneath them. Engine power was the XK engine in 2.4 or 3.4 litre form, and with the latter it was something of a fearsome machine and gained a reputation in sports car racing, and that helped drive the Jaguar brand forward. It's a very important car. Now, the Mk1 had been launched in 1955, but a few years later Jaguar refreshed it into the Mk2, and this is the car that was notorious for being very popular with bank robbers, because you could now have, as with this example here, a 3.8 litre engine producing about 220 brake horsepower as an SAE figure. They were phenomenally quick cars, and very popular as a result. Decent sized boot, get all your mates in the back, go rob a bank, off you go, have a blast. But again, very popular in saloon car racing, where that great power came in useful, but also a big seller for Jaguar. It was just a nice size, it wasn't too big, it wasn't too ostentatious. It offered a nice sporty drive in a relatively compact package. But again, Jaguar was aware it had to move on. So how would it follow up the Mk2? Well, Jaguar thought that the answer was the S-Type. Sir William Lyons, the boss of Jaguar himself, was responsible for the styling. He worked with someone who built his interpretation. So he would sketch a bit and direct someone to come up with all these different designs, and responsible for some of the most beautiful Jaguars we've ever seen, like the XJ range, for instance. But yeah, this S-Type didn't find universal favour, but it was far from just a facelift. We'll take a look at the back end where things get more interesting. So what the S-Type cleverly did was take the structure of the Mk2 and change it. Yes, we've got that slightly controversial front-end facelift, but that's not the whole story. The most interesting bit is here at the back, because we've got styling which apes the Mk10. We've also got rear suspension that apes the Mk10. It's got the independent rear with inboard disc brakes, so a much better package. It makes for a handling that is far superior to the Mk2, which uses a simple beam axle and leaf spring rear. There's a larger boot as well, whereas the Mk2 sort of curves down. This has these longer wings. It's got much more space inside, although some of that space is taken up by the independent rear suspension. It's basically a cradle with the discs, the differential and the drive shafts coming out right in the middle of the car. So let's have a peek underneath. So here is the cradle that holds the differential and those inboard discs. The drive shaft is basically the upper link. You'll see we've got 2 coil and spring units per side, so there's a total of 4 under here. So there's a remarkable lot of engineering going on under here. And this was all developed originally for the E-Type, and then found its way into the big saloons, and then with the S-Type into the compact saloons, and a forerunner of Jaguar's rear suspension design right up until the XJ40, in fact. Under the bonnet we find the fabled XK engine, introduced in 1948 with the XK120 and in production until 1986. Quite remarkable twin cam design. So we've got exhaust this side, inlet the other side, a separate camshaft for each. 3.4 litre form here, twin SU carburetors, and about 210 brake horsepower SAE, which is probably realistically in today's terms more like 170, 180. Quite a lot of punch for what is a fairly compact car. So the big air cleaner here, the beautiful cam covers, a lovely bit of design. And this is the smallest engine you could get in the S-Type. It was either the 3.4 or the fiery 3.8. I think the 3.8 had more like sort of 240, 250 brake horsepower in an SAE form. So yeah, there's a lot of power going on. We've got a heater box here, radiator with a fixed fan by the look of it, lovely Lucas, glass screen wash bottle. Yeah, it's a beautiful engine bay, if rather cramped. There's not actually that much space in here. Inside we've got that gorgeous smell of wood and leather. It's yeah, a proper classic car. Very slim rim steering wheel ahead. We've got a gear selector. Oh, that's the indicator, that's the gear selector. They look very similar, slender stalks. So that enables you to change gear without removing your hand from the wheel. But yeah, wood right across the dashboard, bank of switches here for wipers, washers, to switch the fuel tanks. It says do not use right hand tank. That's a problem with cars in storage. You've got two tanks, both with awful old fuel in them. Heater controls down here, big broad comfortable seats because America was a key market for these cars. I don't think they actually ended up selling that many over there though, because even the Americans thought this styling was a bit curious for our tastes. But we've got 3-point seat belts, albeit of the static type. In here, right hand handbrake, it's down here, right next to the seat. And a radio was probably standard equipment back in the day, but obviously winding windows, opening quarter lights, in some ways it's still a little old-fashioned. Here in the rear, the door opening is quite generous. It sort of opens out and gives plenty of space. There's a decent amount of leg room. My feet go underneath the seats, and a good amount of headroom as well. The S-Type has a flatter roof than the Mark II. A very subtle change just to give a bit more space in the back. It has led to this rather strange rear quarter, and in fact I'll show you how strange that is because it was replicated on the later S-Type. The collection boasts several examples. Also slightly curious, that is a direct replication of the original S-Type roofline. But yeah, there's plenty of space back there. It's not a bad place to be at all. They've got opening rear quarter lights. Look at that lovely mechanism. And of course the door's shut with a proper clunk. Lovely detail here with the reverse lights in this number plate plinth. That's rather delightful. Let's have a look in the boot. And there we go. We've got a slight hump for the fuel tank, I think it is. But you can get quite a lot of dough in there should you be robbing a bank. I don't think the bank robbers were quite so fussy. What we got under this flap here, I wonder. Oh, there we go. We find a full-size spare wheel and a very substantial jack as well. Lovely. This car is finished in opalescent silver blue, which is one of my favourite Jaguar colours. And so the final piece of the puzzle when it comes to compact Jaguars is the 420. As we can see here, it's very much got the style of the later XJ. It precedes that model. It's also effectively a squashed down version of the 420G, which was the Mark 10. They rebranded it 420G, I think for ginormous, to differentiate it from its smaller sibling. But I mean, to be honest, when you catch sight of them, it's very easy to lose track of what's what. But the 420G is much wider, and this was that final flowering. You've got the hooded headlamps that we would see on the XJ. There was also a Daimler version with a crinkly grille, but to all intents and purposes it was a Jaguar, just with a few more trimmings. And I think a very successful makeover. When you look at the two cars next to each other, I mean, they look so different, but they are, to all intents and purposes, the same car. The 420 now having the 4.2 litre, the largest version of the XK engine. This is all well and good, but one of these cars is fully roadworthy. Sadly, it's not the 420. The 420 is undergoing some work, but the S-Type is ready and raring to go. So without further ado, I think we should take it for a drive. So this is where the job acquires dream status. We are aboard this museum piece Jaguar S-Type. Apparently until last year it hadn't run for something 10-15 years, so it's still done very little in the way of mileage since coming into the collection. We've got 45,000 miles on the clock, but most of those were clocked up a very long time ago. So we turn the key to get the ignition on, and then we press the button, and the 6-cylinder XK engine fires into life. Drop her into drive, we take the handbrake off, which is down on the right, and we're away. Here we go, freedom! Freedom for the S-Type. It has escaped the museum collection for a short while. Now, everyone would obviously prefer the manual overdrive transmission, but this is HubNut, so the automatic, which is the Borg-Warner unit, is absolutely ideal here. Oh, listen to that throaty roar. So the real trick of Jaguar, Sir William Lyons was such a canny individual, and maybe it was his northern nature, but he was quite stingy, but also reflected that in the pricing. People forget, given how expensive E-Types are these days, but he deliberately made the E-Type very affordable, so it massively undercut the competition. One of the most beautiful cars ever built, and they weren't actually that expensive for what they were. Oh, listen to that. That is a splendid noise. It harks back to Spitfires and all sorts. Oh yes. And this is one of the most iconic engines of all time. Extraordinary history. Broke so many speed records for production cars, won so many races in E-Types and XKs and the saloons when they went racing. And ultimately, I think that's probably the problem with the S-Type. The S-Type never had any competition pedigree. The world had moved on, and sports cars were becoming proper sports cars, whereas in the immediate post-war years, you would just pick a Jaguar out of the showroom and go rallying in it. Even the Mark 7s had competition pedigree. The S-Type has none of that. And those looks, which were so gawky at the time, I think have aged very well. I will say for my money, the 420 is probably slightly prettier in styling terms, more balanced. This has still got the short nose of the Mark II, allied to the long rear end. It doesn't quite balance out, but in terms of driving experience, it does feel a lot better than a Mark II. Ah, just marvellous. Going to a bend. I haven't got massive confidence in the tyres. I imagine they're quite old, so we won't be going for any heroics, but you can still easily keep up with modern traffic. It just feels composed. It feels very comfortable. You've got those 4 separate coil and spring units at the back to sort of even out the springing and indeed the damping, so it's offers a very composed ride, so you just don't get with the leaf sprung Mark II. Yeah, the steering is pretty much entirely devoid of feel, but these were early years for power steering, in the UK at least. It's so nice to take these museum cars out and just give them, you know, the sights and sounds of the road. These cars were built for driving after all, and the Trust does a huge amount of work. They've got a huge program going on at the moment to try and make more of their cars roadworthy again, which I fully applaud, because as wonderful as it is to see these historic vehicles in one location, seeing them out on the road is something else entirely. Oh, this feels very apt. I'm driving around the gorgeously pretty village of Kyneton. And I think we'll go right here. Such a muscular, purposeful engine, a good amount of torque. It's not the ultimate speed machine compared to the 3.8, but really for what you want of a car of this nature today, it's more than adequate. Right, shall we open up the taps somewhat? There we go. We've definitely got too much power for the modern traffic. We've caught up a Seat Ibiza. But what a noise. I love the sound of an XK engine at full bore. Although I'm primarily a man of simple pleasures when it comes to cars, driving XKs, E-Types, the compact saloons, any chance to hear that engine really sing, it's just absolutely beautiful. And when you think about it, remarkable for its time. The 1940s were not really a time of overhead camshafts and great punchy power units, so it was ahead of its time in many ways, which helped it have such a long life. Now I'm going to let you into a bit of a secret. When it comes to Jaguar saloons, I would far rather have one of these compact saloons than an XJ6. The XJ6, you sit that much lower. Most of them were built in the British Leyland era, well, all of them in fact, so there's a slight cheapening of material. They don't have the raw class of an S-Type. It's time for the all-important windscreen wiper test. No HubNut test would be complete without it. We've got washer. Oh yeah, there we go, there's some wash. Fast and slow on the wipers. Oh, the slow setting doesn't work apparently. But there we go. Considerable overlap, no triangle of doom worries here from those frantic little wiper blades. And the wipers have a park position, which is why they do their little dance. So if I put them on again and then turn them off, they then park a bit lower on the screen. So that's interesting for people who like windscreen wipers. We shall continue our journey. I've just noticed this indicator's left, which is a bit unusual. That was interesting. We appear to be pulling away in second. Woohoo! Oh, I feel like a right Cadon bounder at the same time. Round we go. Just has such poise. You don't expect it necessarily of a classic car, but it does highlight just what these cars were all about. And even with this 3-speed gearbox, we're doing 60 miles an hour at about 2,500 revs. The gearing is tall enough. These really are extraordinary motor vehicles. There's a little tray there. Look at that, there's your tea shelf. Now, for some reason first gear is not working, so I've gone for a manual hold in low. We'll wait for a gap in the traffic and we'll see what happens. It sounds like I've got an engine mounting out of action as well, so there's a bit of a knock on idle, but you know, these are older cars. That's revving up to 4.5 grand. That's 60. Ho, 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 ho. I suspect there's something slightly out of kilter in the gearbox. It doesn't want to select first automatically. I've tried stamping on the throttle from a standstill, like later Mercedes gearboxes tend to be like that. They will only use first if you absolutely floor it. But yeah, she gets her shift on, doesn't she? Right, we're not going to go onto the motorway at this point because it's not a very good point to go on the motorway. So we shall go all the way around. We shall check the coast is clear, and it isn't. We'll wait for the BMW, and then we shall give chase. Yeah, that's definitely second gear. You really can't beat a bit of XK magic. Remarkably, this engine was in production until 1992, and we will see the very last car that had that engine in a future video. Well, there we go. That was the Jaguar S-Type. An absolute beauty of a car, I think, despite what some may think about those hooded headlamps, and a real pleasure to get it out of the collection and out on the road. Get some sunshine on the old girl. I hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you very much to the Jaguar Daimler Heritage Trust for letting me drive this car, and for letting me have a poke around its collection. Well worth a look. You can come, it's free entry if you're already going to the British Motor Museum, which is also worth a look. And yeah, it's been a very interesting experience. So I hope you agree with me that this is a very deserving Jaguar saloon, even though so many have overlooked it over the years. So I shall say, thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Farewell.